Welcome to Descendants of the Imagination. I am Jasiri Jenkins Glenn. Join us today on our journey into the eternal feminine archetype. What does the eternal feminine mean to you?
Well, the eternal feminine is that which is within each and every one of us that is creative and nurturing and powerful and strong. It's not limited to a feminine form, but it is alive in all that lives.
It's greater, deeper, softer, stronger, wilder than any one cultural image.
Something that can never be forgotten, that it shouldn't be forgotten, but it should always be present and revered and acknowledged.
The divine feminine really speaks to us of that fullness, that great expansion of soul.
Yep.
The eternal feminine draws us on. That's a line from the poet Goethe. And here we celebrate just a few poems and stories that honor that deep sense of the ancient feminine.
Sappho remains one of ancient Greece's most honored poets. Only one complete poem remains. Of the possible 10,000 lines of poems, 650 remain. In the fragment that we hear today, she speaks to her daughter, Cleis.
I have a small daughter called Cleis. She is like a golden flower. I wouldn't take all Croesus' kingdom with love thrown in for her. Don't ask me what to wear. I have no embroidered headband from Sardis to give you, Cleis, such as I wore. And my mother always said that in her day, a purple ribbon looped in the hair was thought to be high style indeed. But we were dark. A girl whose hair is yellower than torchlight should wear no headdress, but fresh flowers.
Born in the 14th century and one of the most celebrated Persian and Sufi poets, Hafiz left behind poems focused on love, wine, and religious hypocrisy.
Send those who can be hired to cry out in the lover's market, lost, 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 a wild daughter has been lost. She's wearing a thin crown of foam and a dark red dress. She's dangerous. She'll steal your mind. And yet, whoever finds her can have my soul for dessert. From wherever the shameless, blushing grape of a girl has gone, bring her back home to the poet Hafiz. Lost. A wild daughter has been lost.
As the main character of the 5th century BC play Antigone by Sophocles, Antigone challenged her uncle, who refused to allow her brother a traditional Greek burial after a war ended, and made her uncle king. Her uncle demanded the brother be left on the road. The play is taught across college campuses, with Antigone's fight often viewed as the voice of human rights against tyranny.
It was not Zeus who published this decree, nor have the powers who rule among the dead imposed such laws as this upon mankind. Nor could I think that a decree of yours, a man, could override the laws of heaven unwritten and unchanging. Not of today or yesterday is their authority. No, they are eternal. No man saw their birth. Was I to stand before the gods' tribunal for disobeying them because I feared a man? I knew I should have to die. Even without your edict, if I die before my time, then why I count it gain. To one who lives as I do, ringed about with countless misery, why death is welcome. For me to meet this doom is of little grief. But when my mother's son lay dead, and I neglected him or left him there unburied, that would have caused me grief. This causes none. And if you think it folly, then perhaps I am accused of folly by a fool.
Sojourner Truth was born into American slavery. At 9 years old, she was sold for $100 and a flock of sheep. In 1843, she took the name Sojourner Truth and advocated for the abolition of slavery. At the 1851 Ohio Women's Rights Convention, she gave her now famous speech, "Ain't I a woman?"
Well, Jiren, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches, and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles, or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing here in the head. What's this they call it? Intellect. That's it. What's that got to do with a woman's rights or a Negro's rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to give me my half measure full? Then that little man back there in black, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down, all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it right back up again and get it right side up again. And now they's asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me. And now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say.
The story of Demeter and her daughter Persephone is a major Greek myth. A first-generation Olympian deity, Demeter is the goddess of fertility and fruitfulness.
The Earth Mother, Demeter, had a beautiful daughter called Persephone, who was playing out in the meadow one day. Persephone sat down among the lovely blooms and reached out her fingertips to touch the loveliness. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, and a giant thunderbolt ripped across the land. Up from the depths charged Hades, the god of the underworld. He stood tall and mighty in a black chariot driven by 4 horses the color of ghost. And Hades seized Persephone into his chariots, her veil and sandals flying. Down, down into the earth he reined his horses. Persephone's screams grew faint as the rift in the earth healed, as though nothing had happened. The voice of the girl crying out echoed through the stones of the mountains, bubbled up in the watery cry from underneath the sea. Demeter heard the stones cry out. She heard the watery crying. And then, all over the land, came an eerie silence and the smell of crushed flowers. And tearing the wreath from her immortal hair and unfurling down from each shoulder her dark veils, Demeter flew out over the land like a giant bird, crying out and calling for her daughter. But Persephone was nowhere to be found. And so began Demeter's crazed and months-long search for her beloved girl child. She raged and she wept, she begged mercy and she begged death, and she searched every land formation, underneath, inside, and atop. But no matter what the goddess did, she could not find her heart child. So, she who had made everything on the earth grow throughout time, she now cursed all the fertile fields, screaming in her grief, "Die! Die! Die!" Because of Demeter's curse, no child could be born. No wheat could rise for bread, no flowers for feasts. Everything lay withered, and the animals sucked at parched earth. The babies wept in frustration at dry breasts. This went on for many seasons. Demeter herself no longer bathed. Her robes were mud-drenched. Her hair hung in matted locks. Many gods and mortals came to comfort her, but the pain in her heart was staggering, and she would not surrender, but only continued to rage throughout the land in wild despair. But finally, one early morning, after eons of dryness and drought, she slumped down at the side of a well in a village where she was unknown. And at last, she surrendered her aching body against the cool stone of the well. And what do you know? Along came a woman, or rather, a sort of a woman, and this woman danced up to Demeter, wiggling her hips in a way that was happy and wildly suggestive, and shaking her breasts in a happy dance. The dancing female was magical indeed, for she had no head whatsoever, and her nipples were her eyes, and her vulva was her mouth. And as she danced, she began to regale Demeter with some nice, juicy jokes. And suddenly, in spite of herself, Demeter relaxed and began to smile. And then she chuckled. And soon she gave a great, big, full belly laugh in the company of those dancing hips and heartfelt laughter. And together the two women laughed, the little belly goddess Baubo and the powerful earth mother goddess Demeter. And it was just this laughing that drew Demeter out of her depression and gave her the energy to search again for Persephone with the help of old crone Hecate and laughing Baubo. Persephone was restored to her mother. The world, the land, and the bodies of women thrived again.
Meet Baubo again in this contemporary story, A Trip to Rwanda.
General Eisenhower was going to visit the troops in Rwanda. Or it might have been Borneo, and it might have been General MacArthur. The names meant little to me when I heard this story as a child. The governor wanted all the native women to stand by the side of the dirt road and cheer and wave to welcome Eisenhower as he drove by in his Jeep. The only problem was that the native women never wore any clothes, other than a necklace of beads and sometimes a little thong belt. No, that would never do. So the governor called the headman of the tribe and told him the predicament. "No worry," said the headman. If the governor could provide several dozen skirts and blouses, he would see to it that the women dressed in them for this one-time special occasion. And these the governor and the local missionaries managed to provide. However, on the day of the Great Parade, and just minutes before Eisenhower was to drive down the long road in his Jeep, it was discovered that while all the native women dutifully wore the skirts, they did not like the blouses and had left them at home. So now the women were lined up on both sides of the road, skirted, but bare-breasted, and with not another stitch of clothing on, and no underwear at all. Well, the governor had apoplexy when he heard, and he angrily summoned the headman, who assured him that the head woman had conferred with and assured him that the women had agreed on a plan to cover their breasts when the general drove by. "Are you sure?" bellowed the governor. "I am sure, very sure," said the headman. Well, there was no time left to argue. And we can only guess at General Eisenhower's reaction as his Jeep came chugging by, and woman after bare-breasted woman gracefully lifted up the front of her skirt and covered her breasts with it.
Emily Dickinson is one of the most revered American poets. Writing in the 19th century, she wrote most of her poems in isolation, and the majority remained unpublished during her lifetime. Her original style shows remarkable insight and wit into the human situation.
Wild nights, were I with thee. Wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart. Rowing in Eden, ah, the sea. Might I but moor tonight in thee. Hear the voice of the Indian goddess of love and death, Mother Kali.
Kali wakes on the cremation grounds to take her child at the final hour to her lap. The peaceful mother sits on the pyre, its fire hidden by her sari of love. To hold him in her lap, she left the temple of her joy, and with blessings and fearlessness in her hands, has made the cremation grounds her home. Why fear this place when you'll sleep peacefully at the mother's feet? Who dies ignited by the flames of this world, to him the mother calls, "Come, come to my lap, come to my lap, to lull you to sleep, oh wearied by life. Mother Kali takes you to her lap, disguised as death.
Ellen Bass lives in Santa Cruz and was its poet laureate between 2013 and 2015. Bass says of her style, "I work to speak in a voice that is meaningful communication. Poetry is the most intimate of all writing. I want to speak from me to myself and then from me to you."
At gate C22 in the Portland airport, a man in a broad-band leather hat kissed a woman arriving from Orange County. They kissed and kissed and kissed. Long after the other passengers were clicking the handles of their carry-ons and wheeled briskly toward short-term parking, the couple stood there, their arms wrapped around each other, like he'd just staggered off the boat at Ellis Island, like she'd been released at last from ICU, snapped out of a coma, survived bone cancer, made it down from Annapurna in only the clothes she was wearing. Neither of them was young. His beard was gray. She carried a few extra pounds you could imagine her saying she had to lose. But they kissed lavish kisses like the ocean in the early morning, the way it gathers and swells, sucking each rock under, swallowing it again and again. We were all watching. Passengers waiting for the delayed flight to San Jose, the stewardesses, the pilots, the woman icing Cinnabons, the man selling sunglasses. We couldn't look away. We could taste those kisses crushed in our mouths. But the best part was his face. When he looked at her, drew back and looked at her, his smile soft with wonder, almost as though he were a mother still open from giving birth, as your mother must have looked at you. No matter what happened after, if she beat you or left you or you're lonely now, you once lay there, the vernix not yet wiped off, and someone gazed at you as if you were the first sunrise seen from the earth. The whole wing of the airport hushed, all of us trying to slip into that woman's middle-aged body. Her plaid Bermuda shorts, sleeveless blouse, glasses, little gold hoop earrings, tilting our faces up.
American poet Nikki Giovanni has been publishing poetry since the 1960s. Her early poems were often engined by her deep desire for political justice. Her most recent poems continued to focus on the rights of Black people as well as the subjects of love and illness.
I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and I sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 2 hours. I am a gazelle, so swift you can't catch me. For a birthday present, when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. I sow diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned, and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by my own permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.
Lastly, the divine old crone speaks to all daughters everywhere. Lie back, daughter. Let your head be tipped back gently in the cup of my hand, and I will hold you. Spread your arms wide. Lie out on the stream. Look high at the gulls. A dead man's float is face down. You will dive and swim soon enough where this tide water ebbs to the sea. Daughter, believe me. When you tire on the long thrash to your island, lie up and survive. As you float now, where I held you and let go, remember, when fear cramps your heart, what I told you. Lie gently and wide to the light-year stars. Lie back, and the sea will hold you.
I am Jasiri Jenkins Glenn. Join us again next time as we journey into the imagination.